Hey there, guys. Great to see you. Welcome to the Holy Shed. And guess what? This is week 90. Oh, yes, this is 90 weeks now that we have been shut up here in this shed. Fortunately, it may not be big, but it's small, if you know what I mean. Anyway, look, this week I ain't going to hang around for too long because I'm off to an online memorial for my brother Fred very shortly. But I wanted to make it down here. I wanted to still be here to share for a little while in our Advent Shed journey together. As I mentioned last week, on Tuesday, I took the funeral of Joan, a wonderful woman who had graced this earth for nearly 102 years. And one of the loveliest things that was said about her by her daughter-in-law Sue was that she had the rare gift of listening. Not many people really listen, Sue said, but Joan always did, and she cared too, which is a good reminder to me, someone who's never short of words, that often we need to talk less and listen more. And I believe, if the church could do that, if the church as a whole could talk less and listen more, I believe that people would be more interested in what we do have to say. So let's just pause for a moment before we go any further to light a little Advent candle, really, because sitting with a candle is a pretty good reminder of the key themes of Advent, about waiting and watching and listening and opening up. Sue has asked us if we would remember her friend Karen, who died tonight. You can light it for whoever or whatever is on your heart right now. But there's Karen, and I'd like to light the candle too for Adrian Reith, a beautiful man who passed away this week. So here's to Judy and their lovely family. So please light your candle now, and let's take a moment of quiet. And here's a prayer. God grant us the equanimity of knowing that life is a friendly place. Trust that even when days feel bleak and lonely, we are surrounded by a dazzling array of hidden presences, like stars, too vast to number, and assurance that we are held constantly by strong arms too gentle to feel. Amen. Yes, that really is me and my beloved on our wedding day. And what's so amazing about this photo, is that Pat is 7 months pregnant there. 7 months pregnant. And what's even more amazing is that only half a dozen people at the wedding knew that. Being pregnant outside of wedlock, it's no big deal now, right? It's normal. But in 1968, let me tell you, it was different. I don't know if you've seen the BBC documentary that has been showing it's a few weeks back now, still available, about unmarried women in the 50s and 60s and even into the 70s, how they were being forced to give up their babies for adoption when they didn't want to. It's a distressing film to watch, but it's well worth watching, and showing women, 50 years on, still utterly distraught at the loss of their babies, and also in many cases still in touch with the shame that they felt that society put on them at the time. And you know what? The shocking thing for us is that could have been us, could have been Pat who was forced to give up her baby. It's right in that time span. Except, of course, that, we'd already planned to get married anyway. And I can tell you that sharing the good news of Pat's pregnancy with my mum, and worse still, being required to stand up in front of the church at the time and tell them and to confess to everyone, this still rates as one of my hardest and most shameful experiences. It took us, and probably Pat in particular, a long time to overcome the feeling of shame. For years we avoided telling anyone that our lovely Jenny was actually conceived out of wedlock, until actually she outed us at an anniversary party, which was a fantastic thing for her to do. And looking back, I feel great compassion for those two naive youngsters. I was just 19 on our wedding day, Pat just a little older. But I feel compassion for those youngsters, madly in love and, innocent as the day is long, suffering mental and emotional torment, simply because their enthusiastic passion for each other overflowed in the premature arrival of a beautiful little girl. The real shame, of course, is with those who load young people, and older ones too, with loads of guilt simply for being normal, and also for not bringing themselves to have a decent conversation with young people in particular about what it means to be beautiful, passionate, embodied human beings in this world, and how to live with that. That's the great shame. I believe, guys, in the carnality of grace. The carnality of grace. I also actually believe in the grace of carnality. I believe in the wonder of being human, in the beauty of things like sensual pleasure. I believe in a God of hanky-panky, actually, not to put too fine a point on it. Carnal, simply means bodily or fleshly. It's saying we're flesh and blood and all that goes with that. And it seems amazing to me that Christians have so often made the carnal into a bad thing. They've made the carnal, the bodily, the opposite of spiritual. Often based on an understanding of Paul's teachings in his epistles, viewed actually, I would say, probably misunderstood actually, through a heavy lens of the ideas of Augustine. And there you go. But body and spirit are not enemies. They're not enemies. Just part of the wholeness of who we are as human beings on this earth. So it's astonishing, I think, that most of the issues that trouble the church, and they get their knickers in a twist about, focus in some way or other on carnality, on things to do with sexuality, like celibacy, contraception, divorce and remarriage, homosexuality, cohabitation, and the list could go on. God knows how many people have suffered horribly or been alienated from faith altogether through the church's sometimes attitude to these kinds of things. Which brings me to, very nicely, the seasonal story of a young woman also pregnant a bit too soon. I mean, I don't intend right now to rehearse all the arguments about the virgin birth. I've done them before and I'll do them again, but not right now. I've made it clear, I think, that for me, God entered the world of human experience in a decisive way in Jesus. I mean, I believe that, which is a different thing to saying unique, by the way. But I do believe that God appeared in the world of human experience in a decisive way in Jesus. But I can't for the life of me see why that depends on or hinges on a miraculous conception and birth. As I'm sure you've heard before, the term virgin with respect to Mary, as it's cited the only place it is in Matthew's Gospel, is actually a mistranslation of Isaiah, which doesn't speak of virgin at all. It speaks about a young woman conceiving, which is quite a different thing. And you know what? I love the thought that God would become flesh and blood through and in the midst of a shameful pregnancy like ours in the 1960s and all those other people back then too. A human mistake, perhaps. Could that be how God came into the world? Well, that for me is incarnational theology, and it fits beautifully with a vision of a God who identifies with the despised, who shares in the shame of the outcast for whatever reason, who, thumbs her nose at a respectable religious establishment that does get its knickers in a twist about all these kinds of things. However, literally or not, however it is that we take the Christian story to be, and I don't, by the way, it's a wonderfully human story, a point that's often missed, really, the humanity of it. It's often buried beneath tons and tons of sentimental tosh and theological jiggery-pokery. But it's essentially a story of light appearing in the midst of darkness, of a world pregnant with hope. I like this painting, let me show you, of the Annunciation by a painter called Adam Pomeroy. And he pictures Mary not as a saintly figure, but as a young Irish woman, which is where he lived at the time. And Pomeroy says that he's focusing here on Mary's humanity, which I think he does brilliantly well. And as you can see, there's no representation of the angel Gabriel in the picture, apart from the fact that the only sense of the angelic presence is actually in the shadow cast behind her, the light that's shining in her face, which speaks to me about how I mostly sense and discover the divine, not directly in some great burst of light. That can happen sometimes, but mostly I discover God in the shadows created in the world by God's presence, I think. I can't see God, but I sense God in the shadows. I mean, just take a look. It's a lovely, lovely picture, isn't it? The young woman is beautiful, but very simple. None of the usual religious trappings, no halos or the like, no fine garments, giving the impression that she was from a wealthy family, which she wasn't. No, just a white t-shirt, a plain skirt, a headscarf. There's apprehension in her face, in her appearance, but also attentiveness. What I see in this picture is a soul that's open, or that is opening to wonder. It's beautiful, isn't it? And this is Pomeroy's portrayal of the Nativity, which is equally simple. Just, a bed in a plain room. Mary's body wrapped around the child, almost womb-like, still holding this child within herself. It's the sense of plain, ordinary humanity in both images that I love so much in his work. But I want to show you another picture in a moment of the Annunciation by a late 19th century African-American artist called Henry Ossawa Tanner. But first, I'll just show you a little clip of film that tells you a little bit about this amazing man.
Tanner made his career as a painter in the late 19th century.
He was a very retiring, modest person, but obviously very ambitious because he took off for Paris in 1891 and just made himself into a fantastic, popular painter. His works were purchased by the government in France, and he was the toast of the annual Salon exhibitions. He returned to the United States from time to time to visit his family, but fundamentally he married in Europe and stayed there for the rest of his life because, as he said, in France, he was just an artist, but when he returned to the United States, he was a Negro artist. And I think the burden of prejudice was something that he didn't care to fight. So he stayed in France, won these great laurels, became a mentor to other African-American artists who came to Paris and lived a very successful international career.
Back in those days. And this is just such a beautiful image, isn't it? Bathed in warmth and light. I adore the room, the untidy bedclothes, the ruffled rug. It's another quite naturalistic human portrayal of Mary, open and attentive. And the angel is here in this picture, but not in human-like form, but as not so much a shaft of light from elsewhere, but as something like a crack in the air, really. That's how I see it, a rip in space, as if something which is always there but unseen now appears, breaks through. And that's kind of how I think about God, as a reality that is always there but mostly hidden. Sometimes found in the shadows, sometimes in just those odd moments of brilliant revelation through normal life, maybe through nature, whatever, or a human kindness. It's how I can understand the notion of heaven too, as a parallel reality that sometimes breaks through. But these two dimensions, these two realities, separated only by a wafer-thin veil, and sometimes there's a fracture in the space. Tanner actually travelled to the Middle East, and that's where he did this painting. He found a young Palestinian woman. This is actually a real model that he found to sit for him, Palestinian Jewish woman, dressed in typical Palestinian clothing of the time, to be, as he saw it, a modern-day Mary. That's what he wanted, to bring Mary into his world. And the room is as an actual room, in a house there where he painted it. And I like the way the horizontal line of the shelf on the wall intersects with the crack of light to suggest a cross, pointing toward the unity of his life and death, which Mary was told about, wasn't she? That a sword would pierce her heart too. The colours, the light, the figure of Mary, that crack in the space, so beautiful. I love that picture. Love it. The Christmas story is one of agony and hope, death and resurrection from the very start. Mary knew pain and loss all along the way, right from the awkwardness of disapproving glances and snide comments, her loss of status and reputation in a close-knit conventional community, right through to the death of her son in shame on the cross, and that amazing image that we've looked at before here of the Pieta, of that image that first was painted by Michelangelo of Mary holding her dead son. It's that whole narrative right through that is there from the very beginning, in fact. There's a great story I want to tell you. In the Nuremberg war, crime trials, a witness appeared who astonishingly had lived for a time in a grave, in a Jewish graveyard in Vilna in Poland. It was the only place that he and quite a lot of other people could live while hiding after they'd escaped being taken to the gas chambers. And he said that in a nearby grave, a young woman gave birth to a boy. Imagine that. A woman gave birth to a boy in a grave. Imagine that the child's first cry sounded from a grave, And the 80-year-old grave digger in the garden, wrapped in a linen shroud, apparently was the makeshift midwife in helping to bring this child to birth. And when the newborn child uttered the first shriek, the old man prayed, "Great God, hast thou finally sent the Messiah to us? For who else than the Messiah himself can be born in a grave?" Wow, isn't that incredible? Which, just has such resonances with the story of Jesus in relationship to Mary. Both at the level of religion, theology, and folk culture, the Christmas story has so often been idealized, encapsulated in a bubble or a bauble even of sweetness and light. And yet the reality is actually messy and human, anything but ideal. It's important to embrace this in a world that I think is always idolizing perfection. Even at a cultural level, people are conditioned to look for instance, a perfect Christmas. People always talk about that, don't they? You know, getting the day has got to be just right, and money and effort and time and relationship fractures, you know, all become part of this, chasing this perfection, this ideal of, you know, the perfect Christmas. And at a Christian level, the same thing is true. You know, Mary has become this flawless virginal figure, almost clinically divinely inseminated. You know, it's all just sort of lifted out of the messy human realm into this otherness. Meanwhile, the rest of us do live in this messy world, often feeling like we don't measure up or we don't meet the standard. As I've said before, one of the commonest characteristics of Christians that I have counseled over decades now is guilt, you know, or shame, often simply because they are thinking, feeling, or responding in a normal human fashion. Anthem is one of Leonard Cohen's most famous songs, and I'm sure you'll know it from the chorus. The chorus says, "Ring the bells that still can ring, forget your perfect offering, there is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. Ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in." To me, the way this speaks to me is it says, stop chasing the pipe dream of perfection. Whether that's Christian, cultural, or whatever, forget it. Live the best way you can. Sure, don't be afraid to acknowledge when you get things wrong, but then move on. Ring the bells. Celebrate your humanity. You know, celebrate your imperfections and all. And know this, it's through the cracks, the fractures, the flaws even, that the light gets in. That's what I hear this song saying. We're carnal creatures, but there's grace in our carnality. For me, the Christian story needs liberating from its kind of shiny Christmas wrapping paper kind of understanding and seen for what it is, a story of God revealed in human messiness. Me personally, I've had enough of all that guilt-inducing religion that makes a misery of lives and fails monumentally to celebrate the gift of being human, the grace of carnality. I believe in a God who inhabits bodies, who is comfortable with human passion, who dances to the rhythms of nature and feels the beat of a lover's heart, who feasts on friendship and drinks to the health of our planet, who sees the plight of the poor and the needy and never says, there, you know, you'll be all right when you get to heaven. This is the kind of earthy God that I can believe in. So here's a little Advent exercise I leave you with, dear friends. Find a few minutes, would you? Maybe with a candle. But find a few minutes this week to sit down and just contemplate your own imperfection, the imperfection of your life, and be thankful for it. Be thankful for the imperfection of life. Embrace your own imperfections. Now, this doesn't mean that you want everything to stay the way it is, or that you want yourself to stay the way you are. Hopefully our circumstances can and will change. Things about us can change. Life essentially involves evolution and growth, so all that's part of it. But meanwhile, stop accusing yourself. Stop persecuting yourself for who or what you are or you're not. Please remember, as we've been saying in the shed, regret, guilt and shame are basically pointless emotions unless there is something concrete that we can do about them. You know, if there's something I can do to put things right or to make up for something in the past, fine, do that. But do not allow regret and guilt and shame to overshadow the way that you're living now in the present, or they become part of the whole ongoing legacy of guilt and shame and regret. So just spend a few minutes, would you, being kind to yourself. So that is Reverend Dave's prescription to you. It's your Advent exercise for this week. So let's have a prayer that reminds us about this earthy God. Warm, moist, salty God, you have shown us that grace is always embodied, materialized, in cream cakes and green vegetables, in red wine and freshly baked bread, in damp grass and mighty oaks, colourful birds and grey mornings, and also in the beauty of flawed humanity. Help us to embrace the wonder of who we are, to never deny what we feel or love or long for, but embrace unswervingly the grace of this carnal adventure we call life. May our days, pleasant or sad, fulfilled or frustrated, be crowned with the assurance that nothing in life is worthless or without significance, but charged with mundane grandeur. Amen. There you go. That's worth drinking too, isn't it? So if you have a drink handy, please grab it now. Pour yourself a little spot of something or whatever. Oh my Lord. Just about fitted in. And join me in a toast. This is a toast. Yeah, a toast to our imperfect life, our imperfect circumstances, because this is who we are. This is where we are right now. And to deny that and to just wish ourselves out of it is to stop living in the present. And we need to stop sleepwalking through life and just enjoy and live as fully as we can the life that we have, the dark and painful bits as well as the happy bits. So here's a taste also to bodies and all the messy things about being humans. A toast to Mother Earth, to grey days, even better sunny days, but hey, grey days too. They're still days in our life. A toast to Advent, to waiting, to anticipating. A toast, dear friends, to life. L'chaim. Join me. Amen. So, if you are a fan of the shed, if you like what we're doing here, you can support us through buying us a coffee or two. And the link to the coffee site is always at the top of the posts on the Facebook page. And I think it's there on YouTube as well. But here it is on your screens now. Honestly, we are so thankful for every one of you who supports us in what we're doing by buying us coffees or by saying prayers for us or sending nice letters and posts to us or whatever, or just sending love cyberwise. We appreciate it all. Thank you so much. So here's a blessing. The blessing of God, the eternal goodwill of God, the shalom and salam of God, the wildness and warmth of God be among us and between us, now and always. Amen. So there you go. I'm off to a memorial to think about my lovely brother Fred and with his family and folks online. You have a good evening. Have a good week this week. Be kind to yourselves, as I've already been exhorting you. Be kind to other people round about you. Be kind to the birds, to nature, to this lovely world that we're a part of. And remember, stay human, because that's who we are, folks. And I'll see you very soon. I'm going to leave you with a poem by the wonderful poet David White, and it's called Everything is Waiting for You. And I think it's quite pertinent to what we have been thinking about, and I hope that you enjoy this, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Your great mistake is to act the drama as if you were alone. Your great mistake is to act the drama as if you were alone. As if life were a progressive and cunning crime with no witness to the tiny hidden transgressions. To feel abandoned is to deny the intimacy of your surroundings. Surely even you at times have felt the grand array, the swelling presence, and the chorus crowding out your solo voice. You must note the way the soap dish enables you, or the window latch grants you courage. Alertness is the hidden discipline of familiarity. Alertness is the hidden discipline of familiarity. The stairs are your mentor of things to come. The doors have always been there to frighten you and invite you. And the tiny speaker in the phone is your dream ladder to divinity. The tiny speaker in the phone is your dream ladder to divinity. Put down the weight of your aloneness and ease into the conversation. The kettle is singing even as it pours you a drink. The cooking pots have left their arrogant aloofness and seen the good in you at last. All the birds and creatures of the world are unutterably themselves. Everything is waiting for you.